major organ transplant. These two friends want to live, so one is giving one organ to the other, and we're going to transplant a new organ. So essentially we have an F2 with the UGS inside of this 416, and we want to put that F2 inside of this featherweight. And yes, you are seeing this correctly. This is a cursed gun. So we're putting an F2 inside of here, and then we're going to replace that F2 with this slightly used Kythera, and we're going to work all the magic and make it good. So let's begin. We have this trigger link. It's polished up. I don't know how well you can see it, but I do polish these two little hooks. And that just kind of makes the trigger work, because if it gets too cruddy, it's not the best thing in the world. In addition to that, I re-lubricate it with some synthetic grease. This is what I use to actually lube gears inside of gearboxes. Two things I want to do to this while we have it in this state, just to make it a little bit easier. My method for preventing the engine, particularly the Kythera, from shifting back and forth, and mainly actually keeping that engine shifted forward to the front of the gearbox shell, is by actually using an O-ring in the back. The heavier the trigger is on the Kythera, I found the better it actually performs. You can make a very light trigger, but for the sake of actually allowing it to reset, polishing up the trigger links and the disconnect, while also having a heavy trigger, is what's really going to make this feel the most like a mil-spec trigger. And that's of course what we're after. We want it to be pretty realistic. You can add more shims down here, or you can add a grub screw underneath to compress that spring a bit more to make it heavier. You could use a heavier trigger spring on the actual trigger, but that's not going to contribute at all to the engine itself resetting when you release the trigger. Alright, pin goes right in, reset. Nice heavy trigger. Now, as far as this shifting back and forth, what's really going to end up preventing it from going backwards is this O-ring. And you can see how this O-ring actually fits right between the engine and the end of the window. So making sure that that O-ring is where it needs to be is very crucial. And the O-ring is going to kind of keep it in place, but also as I close the gearbox shell, I'm going to physically force the engine to the forwardmost part of the gearbox shell. We're actually going to take some fresh macro line and just put it on this valve, just because I want to eliminate any chance of things leaking. Possibly the easiest way to get the macro line onto here and to cold fit it is to actually screw the input fitting into the engine, and then get a good grip on the engine, and then you just kind of have to force that on. Eventually it'll slowly slide on like a sock, and then you're good to go. We're going to keep it this length for now. We'll cut it to the UGS once we get to that step, but let's actually continue the install. So you can actually inspect from the front here whether there's a tiny gap between the shell and the engine, and it should be pretty flush. Also, the O-ring is just going to prevent this from shifting back and forth. We're looking pretty good. It's feeling all right. Really quick, I'm just going to connect some air to it as it is and feel that trigger and make sure the trigger is to my liking. The real test is you want to shoot it and you want to release that trigger as slow as possible and just make sure it resets. Yeah. And you want to make sure that your trigger link is actually perpendicular to this bottom line. That'll ensure the best fitment. And It'll also ensure that you'll have the least amount of problems as far as your trigger and your trigger link rubbing together the wrong way. So if you have to loosen this up just to make that slight adjustment, go ahead and do that. Little baby tank in here. New line is not leaking in here, it's the right length. All right, so we did the whole inner workings. I did re-R-hop the barrel because the patch that was on there was not, it was not the right patch for the barrel. It was cut and it was not cut right. So that patch needed to go. Plus, even if it was cut right, it was pretty old and used anyway. So we did that and we got rid of the max hop and we went with the Crytac chamber. Things are just easier now. And it's hopping very consistently. It's shooting really nice. We got the nice trigger that resets just like we needed to. And safety works, as it should. And yeah, so now we're gonna go and put that F2 inside of that featherweight. That noise is my AC in the background. We're now onto this featherweight. We're gonna put this F2 in here, salvaged from that 416. In addition to that, we're of course gonna put a R-hopped Lambda barrel with a bull gear hop-up chamber. Now, this is the classic Army and A&K compatible chamber. And it's gonna work in the featherweight without any modification because we actually went ahead and got a new outer barrel for it. This is the classic Army A&K spec outer barrel. Of course, we need a new nozzle in order for this engine to work inside of here. This board will still work because this is a version 2 gearbox. And we're also going to put in the improved feed block that I made. And these are available if anybody wants them. You can go on my website, see them. This is another part of that adapter. Haven't processed it yet. That's why there's still support material here. Okay, so now we're here. We put the new nozzle in. This O-ring is to retain this and prevent it from going backwards and also just hold it in place. Trigger set, board is set. We put this braided line. It happened to actually fit well on this F2. For some reason these lines have not been easy to screw in as of lately, but I can confirm that it's not leaking. And to prevent it from leaking in the future, I did zip tie it to the actual shell so that it's not going to get tugged on like that or anything. And I'm probably going to put another courtesy zip tie just to keep everything down. Make sure that, you know, as it goes through the abuse of Milsim West and whatnot, we're not going to get any leakage. She is firing. We'll tweak settings after we do all that other stuff. I ended up opting for a 303 barrel. I did have it R-hopped already, which makes it convenient for me right now. Not a lot of time has passed. And we're going to use that Modify flat nub because that just squishes right on in there. It hits different. And obviously if we have the hop arm on there, not my fingernail, we get nice even pressure on it. And you can look down that barrel and you can see what you're getting right there. We're just going to install the feed block and post it. So if you're interested in how these install and how easily it is, you can watch that video. But I'm going to do all that now. Okay, so we got that block in and we have the hop-up chamber in here, and you can see that it is perfectly center. All right, that window is definitely top dead center. It's awesome. That's why I made this. And again, in addition to it doing that, allowing us to run that classic Army style hop-up chamber inside of the featherweight, we can still run the featherweight hop-up inside the featherweight, but it does also just improve overall feeding because this whole feeding track is improved. It's wider, and the entrance here is a bit longer to stay engaged with magazines, particularly mid-caps. Much better even if they happen to wobble inside of this magwell. And then also it is completely blocked off so BBs cannot get inside the receiver. Overall, it's just a great product, great improvement to the featherweight. And we have it in here. That's great. And if you're going to be running that classic Army, the whole point of this piece is this is just a cap that goes on the end of this hop-up chamber to extend it out, just to keep that nozzle covered because it is an elongated nozzle. So it's all good. All right, so we have the gun back together. Everything's good. We have the MCX stock on here. It's very cursed. Let me just do a little replay for you.
Yeah, it's an MCX stock.
It's on a 3D printed Picatinny stock adapter. We have this thing. It's is this real?
No.
It's real? Okay, we have a replica Hydra mount.
No, it's not a Hydra mount. It's another one, Redback 1.
Redback 1? It's a replica Redback 1 mount? At any rate, we have the Knights Armament can fitted on here. It's very easy to get to. Modified the gas tube a little bit to do that, the gas block. CA barrel, because it's lighter than the featherweight barrel. Classic Army A&K compatible bull gear hop-up chamber with the whole improved feed block, and we're pretty much ready to go. You guys already saw the internals on this. I'm gonna shoot some targets. We have an EPM1. Clicks in like butter. It's good to go. Spread down is not good at all. It's all good. It's empty. The BBs fall out. They don't roll into the body because it's an improved feed block and it stops that, unlike the stock counterpart. So it's good to go. Customer's happy with it. I'm happy with it. Expect these stocks to be dropping at some point. These improved feed blocks are available. You can see them on my website. I'm going to edit this and put a little link thing there. And we're good to go. Yeah.